My name is Daniela Navarro. I am 38 years old, and I used to believe that the house my grandfather left me was mine in every way that mattered, legally, emotionally, completely. I was wrong about one of those things, and learning which one took me for years. The house is a craftsman bungalow in Riverside, California. White exterior, green trim, a front porch with a swing that my grandfather Ernesto installed himself sometime in the late 80s using hardware from a store that no longer exists. The yard is small but deep, with a lemon tree in the back corner that produces more fruit than any one person can use, which is exactly what my grandfather intended. He was a man who believed in abundance as a moral position. He grew up without enough of anything and spent the rest of his life making sure the people around him had more than they needed, and the house was the clearest expression of that, maintained carefully, paid off entirely, left to me in a will that was witnessed, notarized, and recorded with the county clerk's office in January of the year he died. He left it to me specifically. Not to my parents. Not to my sister Camille. To me, by name, with a recorded instrument that a title company would have no difficulty reading. I knew this because I had read it more than once, and I kept a copy in a brown envelope in the bottom drawer of my desk alongside the original deed, which I had retrieved from the county recorder's office myself, 2 weeks after the funeral, because I had learned by then that documents you do not hold personally have a way of becoming documents other people claim not to know about. I want to ask you something before I go further. Think about the last time someone in your family made a decision that involved you, your property, your money, your life, without consulting you, and then explained it as if they had done you a favor. If that's happened to you, you already know what the next part of this story feels like. If it hasn't, pay attention because this is what it looks like from the inside. I am a paralegal. I have been one for 12 years, the last 7 at a firm in downtown Riverside that handles civil litigation with a specialty in property disputes. I know what a deed looks like. I know what it means. I know the specific, procedural permanence of a recorded instrument, the way it sits in the public record like a fact that does not require anyone's permission to remain true. This is relevant. I want you to understand, before anything else, exactly what kind of person I am in the context of what happened, the kind of person who keeps the original deed in a brown envelope and knows precisely where it is at all times. I had been working in Sacramento for 14 months when my sister moved into my house. That part matters too. I took the Sacramento position because the firm offered it, and the firm offering it meant something, a senior paralegal role on a complex multi-party property litigation that had been running for 3 years and needed someone who could read a chain of title the way other people read a story, forward and backward, catching the places where the narrative had been quietly altered. I was good at it. My supervising attorney, a precise woman named Janet Cho, told me in my second week that I had found a recorded easement that 2 previous attorneys had missed, and said it the way people say things when they want you to know it is not a small thing. I kept the Riverside house. I had a friend, Marta, check on it every few weeks, water the lemon tree, make sure the porch light was working, forward anything that looked important. The plan was always to return. Sacramento was a posting, not a relocation. The house was mine, and it would be there when I came back, and I did not spend a great deal of time worrying about it because I had the deed in the brown envelope and the law is, in most respects, not ambiguous about what a recorded deed means. I found out from Marta. She sent me a text on a Tuesday evening in October, a photograph of my front porch, and on the porch, 3 cardboard boxes, a rolled-up rug, and a lamp I had never seen before. Did you know someone's moving in? The text said. I stared at it for a long time. Then I called my sister. Camille did not answer. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Daniela, she said, in the tone she uses when she has already decided how a conversation is going to go. Mom, I said. What is in my house? A pause. Camille needed a place. You're not using it. I squared the papers on my desk and said nothing. She's just there temporarily, my mother said. Your father thought it was a reasonable solution. My father's name is Rodrigo Navarro. He is 64 years old, and he has, for as long as I can remember, organized the world into problems and solutions, and reserved for himself the exclusive authority to determine which was which. He is not a bad man. I want to be careful about that, because the easy version of this story requires a villain who is simply cruel, and my father is not simply anything. He built a small landscaping business from 2 trucks and a contract with the Municipal Parks Department into a company with 22 employees and a client list that includes commercial properties and residential developments across 3 counties. He did it through precision and patience and an absolute certainty that he understood systems better than the people inside them. This is mostly true. It is also the quality that made him, as a father, genuinely difficult to argue with, not because he was louder than you, but because he had already decided the outcome before the conversation began, and he conducted the conversation as a formality, a courtesy he extended to the people he had already overruled. The first time he made a decision about my house without telling me, I was 34. I had been in Sacramento for 2 months. He called me on a Sunday morning, which was unusual, and told me he had arranged for a friend's nephew, a man named Beto, whom I had never met, to do some repairs on the back fence. A section of it had softened in the rain, and he had noticed it during a drive-by. I didn't ask you to do that, I said. I know, he said. I was in the neighborhood. It needed doing. Dad, I have a process for the house. Marta checks on it. Marta doesn't know what a fence looks like when it's about to go, he said. Beto does. It's handled. I thanked him. I did not feel grateful. I felt the particular unease of someone who has just watched a boundary get walked across so smoothly that objecting seems disproportionate, and I filed it away and said nothing more about it. He called 2 weeks later to tell me Beto had also repainted the front trim while he was there because the green was fading and it seemed like a good time. I said, Dad, I liked the green. It's still green, he said, just brighter. The following spring, Camille lost her apartment. She had been renting a 1-bedroom in Fontana with a roommate who moved out without notice and left Camille short on rent, and my parents' solution was swift and required no input from me. My mother called me on a Friday evening and explained the situation in the same factual, already decided tone she had used in October, and I said, She can't stay in my house, Mom. I have a tenant relationship with Marta for the... Marta waters plants, my mother said. That's not a tenant. I have a verbal arrangement. Camille needs somewhere for 6 weeks, maybe 8. You're in Sacramento. The house is empty. The house is not empty. I live there. You're not there, she said. I held the phone for a moment. Something tightened across my shoulders, a slow pull of tension I had learned to recognize as the particular physical sensation of watching an argument I had already lost. Put Dad on, I said. My father's version was the same as my mother's, delivered with the additional authority of someone who considers himself a reasonable man. She's your sister, he said. 6 weeks. She'll be out before you're back. I'm not asking her to move in, I said. I'm saying no. Daniela. A pause. The specific pause my father used when he was reordering a conversation. She has nowhere to go. You have a house sitting empty. This is not a complicated situation. It's my house, I said. And you're being very rigid about it, he said. I squared my notepad on the desk and said nothing. I'll talk to Camille about a firm timeline, he said, as if I had agreed. 6 weeks. You won't even know she was there. That was 18 months before October. Camille did not leave after 6 weeks. I know this because Marta told me, first at 6 weeks, then at 3 months, then at the point when Marta stopped checking because Camille had asked her not to come by anymore, something I did not learn until later. My father, when I raised it, said Camille was having a hard time and I should be patient. My mother said I was making it about me. I called Camille 3 times. She answered once and told me she was looking at options and that she needed a little more time. What I did not say to any of them, through all of it, was what I knew about the deed. I did not say it because I had learned over 38 years that in my family announcing a position is not the same as holding one, and that the only positions that held were the ones you kept quiet and documented. Here is what the pattern looked like from the inside. I had been managing the estate documentation for my grandfather Ernesto's affairs for 6 years before he died. Not officially, there was no title for what I was, no billing arrangement, no acknowledgement in any meeting with a family attorney. I was simply the one who understood the documents, and when you are the one who understands the documents find their way to you. I had reviewed every revision to Ernesto's trust over the 4 years before his death, catching the places where the prior drafting had created ambiguities that a decent plaintiff's attorney would have found useful. I had flagged a beneficiary designation error on a savings account that would have passed outside the trust and into probate on his death, corrected 2 years before it became a problem, because I read the account statement he forwarded me thinking it was something else. I had coordinated with a family attorney, a man named Dennis Falk, through every amendment and restatement, providing document summaries in plain language that my parents could read without needing to ask Dennis to explain them. I had done this for 6 years, evenings and weekends, without being asked and without being thanked in any formal sense. My grandfather thanked me. He thanked me in the way he did most things, indirectly, through action. When I drove down from my previous apartment in Pomona to take him to his cardiology appointments, he would sit in the passenger seat and tell me things about the house, the year the kitchen was redone, the name of the man who poured the front walk, the specific weight of the porch swing when he first put it up, and how he'd had to re-anchor it twice before it hung right. He was telling me the house the way people tell you something they intend to give you. I understood that. I did not say so. We drove to his appointments and I took notes on what the cardiologist said, and I typed them up and emailed them to my parents, who thanked me and then generally did not follow up on the recommendations. The first incident I remember with real precision happened when I was 31. My grandfather was still living in the house then, managing it himself, 90% functional and entirely resistant to the idea of assistance. My father had proposed to the family at a Sunday dinner that we should consider whether Ernesto should move to a facility, something smaller, easier to manage. He presented it as a practical matter. Ernesto was at the table. I said, "He's not ready for that, and he hasn't asked for it." My father looked at me the way he sometimes looked at me when I spoke in the middle of a monologue. "I'm talking about what's sustainable," he said. "He sustains it fine," I said. "Daniela." The same tone, the same reordering pause. "You're not here every week." "I'm here every 2 weeks," I said. "I take him to his appointments. I reviewed his trust documents last month. I know exactly how he's doing." My father looked at his plate. He did not argue further, which was not the same as conceding. The facility conversation went away, and I did not hear it again. But I noticed that afterward, at Sunday dinners, my father began directing estate-related questions to my brother Tomas, who had no legal background and a general disinclination toward paperwork, and who would look at my father and shrug and say, "Whatever you think, Dad," which was precisely the answer my father found most useful. The second incident was 2 years later, after Ernesto's first minor stroke. Nothing catastrophic, a TA, 36 hours in the hospital, a medication adjustment, and a set of follow-up protocols I printed out and laminated and put on the refrigerator door. My father arrived at the hospital the same day and spent 40 minutes with the attending physician and then called a family meeting in the waiting room in which he outlined a plan for Ernesto's care going forward. The plan was detailed and confident and did not reference any of the printed protocols, the medication schedule I had already coordinated with the pharmacy, or the follow-up appointments I had booked. When he finished, I said, "I've already scheduled the neurology follow-up. It's in 2 weeks. I'll take him." My father looked at me. "Good," he said, and continued talking. I had also, over those same years, prepared the property tax documentation for the Riverside house annually, Ernesto's filing while he was alive, then the estate's filing in the year of his death, then my own filing once title transferred. I had negotiated with the county assessor's office when the reassessment came in 17% over the comparable sales, a letter I wrote myself, citing 3 specific comps, which resulted in a reduction that saved me approximately $4,000 annually. I had maintained the insurance on the house through 2 renewal cycles, catching a coverage gap on the detached garage structure that the prior policy had omitted. I had arranged the plumbing repair in the first year, a slab leak under the kitchen, $11,000, negotiated down from the first bid by calling 2 additional contractors and presenting the competing estimates to the first one. I had done all of this from Pomona, then from Sacramento remotely evenings because it was my house and I took care of what was mine. None of this was acknowledged in any family conversation about the house. The house was discussed, when it was discussed at all, as an asset that existed in my name but belonged, in the ambient logic of my family, to the collective, available for reallocation when the collective decided reallocation was practical. The Sacramento case settled in September. I gave Janet Cho my notice the first week of October and told her I was returning to Riverside. She said she was sorry to lose me and that if I ever wanted to come back, the door was open, and I thanked her and meant it. I called my mother to tell her I was coming home. She said, "Oh, good," in the tone of someone receiving information that creates a problem they have not yet decided how to present. I noted the tone and filed it. I called Camille. She did not answer. I called my father. He said, "When are you planning to be back?" 2 weeks, I said. I need Camille out of the house before then. She's had 18 months. A pause. She's been going through a difficult period. Dad, I said. I need my house. I understand that, he said, which was not the same as agreeing with it. I'll talk to her. He did not call me back that week. I texted Camille twice and received one response that said working on it. I finished packing my Sacramento apartment, returned my key to the landlord, loaded my car on a Thursday morning, and drove 4 hours south. I called Marta from the road. She said, "Danny, I haven't been able to go by in a few months. Camille asked me not to come. I don't know what it looks like inside." I pulled off the freeway at a rest stop and sat in my car for a moment. There was a specific kind of stillness that came over me when things were further along than I had allowed myself to calculate. Not surprise, exactly, more like the feeling of a measurement coming back confirmed. I had known, in the way that you know things you have not yet permitted yourself to fully look at, that Camille was not simply staying temporarily. The 3 boxes and the lamp in Marta's photograph 18 months ago. The roommate who had left without notice. My father, she's been going through a difficult period, which was the phrase he used when he had decided a situation was permanent and was spacing out the disclosure. I reached into the back seat and took out my work bag. The brown envelope was in the bottom, where it always was. I set it on the passenger seat. I drove the rest of the way, without stopping. The house looked the same from the street, which I had not expected to find reassuring and did anyway. White exterior, green trim, the brighter green my father had authorized without asking me. The lemon tree was visible over the back fence. The porch swing was still there. There was a car in the driveway I did not recognize. I parked on the street. I took the brown envelope from the passenger seat and walked up the front path. I had my key. I tried it in the lock, and it did not turn. I stood on my own front porch and looked at the lock for a moment. It was new hardware, brushed nickel, a brand I wouldn't have chosen. A locksmith's installation, clean and recent. I rang the doorbell. Camille answered in 30 seconds, which meant she had seen me coming. She was wearing a cardigan I recognized as mine from a shelf in the bedroom closet, and she looked at me with the expression of someone who has been rehearsing a version of this moment and is now recalibrating because the actual version is happening. "Danny," she said. "Camille," I said. "I was going to call you," she said. "I need to come in," I said. She held the door half open, the way people do, when they are not sure whether they are going to step back or hold the line. Behind her I could see the entryway, a coat rack I didn't own, a pair of shoes that weren't mine, and, visible through the doorway to the kitchen, a counter that had been entirely rearranged. "I needed more space," she said, "and you were never here anyway. Mom said it was fine." Something settled in my chest, not anger, something older and flatter, the feeling of a sequence that has finally reached its last step. I reached into the brown envelope and took out the deed. I held it up and looked at it for a moment. Then I walked past her into my kitchen and set it on the counter between us without saying anything. She looked at it. She looked at me. A man's voice came from the hallway. The locksmith, still packing his tools into a bag. He looked at Camille. He looked at the deed on the counter. He read the name on the first line, and then he looked at Camille again in the particular way that people in trades look at a situation when the situation has just changed. He started removing her lock. The locksmith's name was printed on his shirt pocket, Dale. He looked at the deed, looked at Camille, and said nothing further. He unzipped his bag and went back to work on the door. Camille watched him for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Danny," she said. This is not what it looks like. What does it look like? I said. I was going to talk to you. I've been meaning to. Dad said you were coming back, and I was going to. She stopped. She put her hand on the counter, not far from the deed. I've been here a year and a half. I've been taking care of the place. You changed the locks, I said. The old ones were worn, she said. I was going to give you a key. When? She didn't answer. I picked up the deed and held it so the first page faced her. I'm going to ask you to show me the instrument that gives you the right to change the locks on this property, I said. The recorded instrument. Any instrument. She looked at the page. She looked at my face. You know there isn't one, she said. I know, I said. Dale came back through the entryway with the old hardware in a cloth bag and the new lock cylinder in his hand. Ma'am, he said to me, I'll have the original hardware reinstalled in about 15 minutes. You'll want to test the key before I leave. Thank you, I said. Camille took her hand off the counter. So that's it, she said. You're just going to throw me out. I'm going to move back into my house, I said. I told Dad 2 weeks ago that I needed you out before I returned. I told you 18 months ago that this was temporary. I had nowhere to go, she said. You had the same nowhere to go that you had before you moved into my house without asking me, I said. I said no. You moved in, anyway. She sat down at the kitchen table, my kitchen table, which she had moved to a different position than I kept it, pushed against the window instead of centered in the room. Mom and Dad said, she started. Mom and Dad don't own this house, I said. Ernesto left it to me. You know that. You were never here. That is not a legal position, I said. She looked at the table. Dad is going to be upset about this. I know, I said. I set the deed back in the brown envelope and placed it on the counter. He can call me. He called 40 minutes later. I was in the living room, which Camille had reorganized entirely. The couch against the wrong wall, a bookshelf I didn't recognize, a framed print above the fireplace that I had never seen. Dale had finished and gone. Camille was in the bedroom she had taken as her own, door closed. I sat on my couch, in the wrong position in my living room, and answered my father's call. Daniela, he said. Dad, I said. Camille called me. She's very upset. I understand, I said. You can't just walk in and throw her out like that. She lives there. She does not live there, I said. She was staying there temporarily, without my consent, past any reasonable temporary period, in a house that is mine by recorded deed. You're being very rigid, he said. I had heard that before. I set the envelope on the arm of the couch and looked at it. I need to ask you something, Dad, I said. And I need you to actually answer it. A pause. Go ahead. Do you believe this house belongs to me? A longer pause. Legally, yes. That's the only kind of belonging that applies to a house, I said. I want Camille's things out by Saturday. I will help her move them if she needs it. I will help her find somewhere to go. But I am sleeping in my own house tonight, and I need you to tell her that this is not something I'm discussing. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. Not softer, exactly, but recalibrated, the way it did when he had reached the edge of an argument and found that the ground did not continue. I'll talk to her, he said. Thank you, I said. I ended the call and sat with the quiet of the house for a moment. The lemon tree was visible through the back window, late afternoon light on the leaves. The porch swing was still where it should be. The kitchen counter was in the wrong configuration, and the living room furniture was all wrong, and the lock was back to hardware I recognized, and I was in my house, and those were the facts. Camille left on Saturday morning. My mother came with her, not to help me, I understood, but to be present in the way that mothers sometimes are when they want a situation witnessed by someone who loves the person they think is the victim. She brought pastries and set them on the counter and did not offer me one directly, but left them where I could reach them, which was her version of a peace gesture. My father did not come. Camille moved efficiently, which told me she had been thinking about this longer than she admitted. She had a system. Boxes already half-packed, the furniture she had brought stacked near the door. I carried boxes to her car when she let me. My mother stood in the kitchen and watched, and occasionally said things like, so much work, and this is very hard, in the general direction of no one. When the last box was in the car, Camille stood in the doorway of the kitchen, the same doorway she had stood in 2 days before, and looked at me. Her eyes were red. I did not think she had been crying about the house. "You could have called me," she said. "I called you 3 times," I said. "You answered once." She looked at the floor. I didn't know what to say. "I know," I said. And then I said the rest of it, because I had decided that I was done carrying it silently. "I want to tell you something," I said. "And I need you to hear it as something I'm saying once, and then I'm not going to say it again." She looked at me. "Dad told me," I said, "that I was being rigid. He said it in October when I told him Camille needed to leave. He said it 2 years before that when I told him no one had asked Camille to move in. He said it the first time when I told him I didn't need Beto to fix my fence, and that was 4 years ago." I paused. My mother had stopped moving in the background. "What he meant each time," I said, "was that I was not making the decision he had already made for me. That is what rigid means in this family. It means you have a position and you won't abandon it because someone with more authority in the room has a different one." Camille said nothing. "He told you the house was empty," I said. "I was in Sacramento working a case that I was specifically recruited for, and the house was not empty. It was mine, and I was in it the same way any person is in a house they own and intend to return to. He told you it was fine. What he had was permission he was not authorized to give." I folded the cloth I'd been holding and set it on the counter. "When he told me I was being rigid about the fence," I said, "I was paying property taxes on this house, maintaining the insurance, managing the repairs, and reviewing the estate documents that made sure this house passed to me cleanly and not into a probate proceeding that would have taken 18 months and cost everyone money. I was doing all of that, and he sent a man I'd never met to paint my trim without asking me, and when I said something about it, he told me I was rigid." Camille's jaw had tightened. I did not think she was angry at me. "When he told me it was reasonable for you to stay here," I said, "what I was doing was living in a temporary apartment in Sacramento and leaving this house intact for my return, the way any person does when they take a work posting and intend to come back." And I said no, and he overruled me, and 18 months later I drove down to find my locks changed. My mother said, quietly, "Daniela." "I'm not angry, Mom," I said. And I wasn't not by then. "I'm telling Camille the shape of what happened, so she has the whole picture. Not just the part that starts with me showing up with a deed." Camille looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I didn't know he told you no." "I know," I said. "That's the other thing I want you to know." She nodded once. She picked up her bag. She hugged me at the door, briefly, the hug of two people who are not finished with each other but have run out of room for the conversation today. I held the door for my mother as she left, and my mother paused on the threshold and looked at me and said, "You're so much like Ernesto," and then walked to the car. I stood on the porch for a moment after they pulled away. The lemon tree was in the sun. The swing hung level. I called my father that evening. He answered on the third ring. "They got everything," he said. "Yes," I said. A pause. "You know I was just trying to help her." "I know," I said. "But Dad, the next time you want to help someone by using something of mine, I need you to ask me first." He was quiet. "That's all," I said. "That's the only thing." He said, "All right," in the tone of a man who is not entirely sure he agrees, but has decided to end the call before he says something that reopens it. I thanked him and said goodnight. The lemon tree produced that November the way it always does, more lemons than I could use, more than I could give away, more than made any practical sense. I made a pitcher of agua fresca and left a bag on the porch for the neighbor on the left, who had waved at me the day I returned like someone welcoming back a street that had been quiet too long. I have thought a lot in the months since about what my father meant when he said I was being rigid. He did not mean it as a criticism of my character, not entirely. He meant it as a description of a person who would not move when he applied pressure, and in his experience, people move. He had built his business and his family on the understanding that he could see a situation more clearly than the people inside it, and that his decisions, executed with enough confidence, would be accepted as the right ones. This worked most of the time. It worked because most people, confronted with that kind of certainty, will eventually wonder whether they are the one who is wrong. Whether the thing they want is too small or too rigid or somehow a failure of generosity. My grandfather Ernesto knew something about this. He never said it directly. He was not a man who talked about family dynamics as a subject. But he told me once, sitting on this porch in the year before he died, that the best thing a person can do with a piece of land is know exactly where the edges are. Not because you intend to fight about them, he said, but because if you don't know, someone else will decide for you. And then you'll spend the rest of your time trying to explain where the line was instead of just standing on the right side of it. I think about the deed in the brown envelope. The way I carried it in the bottom of my work bag for 14 months in Sacramento, not because I thought I would need it exactly, but because some part of me understood that the line existed and wanted it close. I think about the 6 years of estate work I did for Ernesto, the property tax filings, the insurance renewals, the plumbing bid I negotiated in a parking lot on a Tuesday evening, and I think about the fact that none of it was ever mentioned at a Sunday dinner, and I am not angry about that anymore. I did those things because they were mine to do, and I knew how to do them, and that is reason enough. What I did not do for a long time was say the line out loud. This is mine. That is not an easy sentence in a family that has decided everything belongs to everyone, which is another way of saying everything belongs to the person who speaks the loudest and moves fastest. Saying it felt rigid. It felt, for a long time, like a failure of warmth. It is not. It is just a fact. And facts do not require anyone's permission to remain true. If you watch someone treat your yes or your no as a suggestion, share this with them. Not as a lesson, just as a reminder that they are not the only one. The people and events in this story are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to real persons or situations is coincidental.